This is IGN Live at E3 2013. Our next game has been a long time coming, and we're just happy that strategy gamers are finally going to get their fix. It's time now for Company of Heroes 2.
Hi guys, we're here with Quinn Duffy, the director of the game for Company of Heroes 2. He's here to present to us the upcoming game that's going to be released on the 25th. Quinn, what are you showing us today?
We're going to show you part of a campaign mission. This is midway through the campaign. And this is the Russian attempt to free the city of Leningrad from a German siege. And the Germans had besieged the city for about 900 days, so an extensive period of time, and hundreds of thousands of people were starving. And so the motivation for the troops in the game is really, really strong, because many of them had families in the city.
All right, that's cool. So I've played the beta that we're seeing on Steam, so the people that can play still for another 5 days, I think. And I saw the weather was influencing all that. And that's one thing that's new this year at the this new iteration of the game, which was not present in the first Company of Heroes. Can you talk to us a bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, the Eastern Front was a cold and forbidding place. You can get very, very cold in Russia, and both armies suffered from the cold. There's a character named General Winter that both the Germans and the Russians talked about, and he was merciless and affected both sides equally. And so your troops can suffer from exposure to cold. They can be kind of clouded by blizzards. They trudge through the deep snow. The ice, if you've seen the demo, can break under vehicles and troops and send them to the bottom
really
of the water.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so it's really about kind of a choice and consequence and risk and reward in terms of how we interact with the environment. It's kind of a pivotal part of telling the story of the Eastern Front.
Pretty cool. Has there been anything new that's been done to the units? Of course, you've got new factions now, so obviously there's going to be new strategies with new units. But maybe you could tell us a bit more about the Russian units that are in the game that were not present in the first one.
Yeah, a big part of our goal when we start to design armies is to consider asymmetric army design. It's sort of a policy in the game design of Relic to deliver really different feeling armies. And we start with kind of an essence statement. And we know the Russians were often ill-trained, but their level of bravery and their willingness to sacrifice was incredible. And so those are things that we're trying to get across in the design of their army. The conscript forces that form the backbone of their army are versatile, but a bit ill-trained, and they're up against the elite of the German forces. And it's really about delivering that tone, this kind of titanic battle between these two very, very different armies.
And there's some, you were saying bravery and such, because I've seen some units that are a bit sort of kamikaze, if you want, and gets sort of special, they're a bit of a special value if they do something of valor, basically. Yeah,
the conscripts have the ability to do things like "Hoorah!" This was a Russian battle cry that they delivered on the field, and it gives them temporary little bonuses, speed bonuses, to allow them to, say, move around and flank a machine gun nest. And the Germans talked about the "Hoorah!" as sort of raising goosebumps. It was a mournful, powerful cry that the Russians sort of elicited before their big attacks and their big assaults. And so we wanted to try and capture that feeling in the game as well.
So the game, the first one was quite fast-paced. I mean, compared to other RTS, you don't have to work so much for your resource. The objective of the game is actually to capture resource, and you got those three various resources. How does these new units, the Russians, work within that resource scheme of things within the game? Does it accelerate the game pace, or does it slow it down a bit? Because they seem to be very aggressive. They're not very defensive.
In some cases, the Russians are on the offensive, and you can use them very, very aggressively, use their numbers to your advantage to capture key pieces of the map. The challenge for them is holding those pieces. So while they can capture a lot, they now have to defend against the might of the German army, and they've got very heavy tanks. They've got very well armed infantry troops to be able to counterattack against the Soviet forces. So you still need to use heavy weapons and team weapons, anti-tank guns and machine guns, to protect your gains, defend against the Germans, and sort of push them off the map.
And we were talking about the weather. Just coming back to that, do the Russians have any advantage because that's their home territory? Are they a little bit more advantage to the weather? Or
in some cases, especially when we get a little bit later in the war, both sides had adapted a little bit, and so they're suffering more or less equally. But there are some key units that are invulnerable to the effects of cold, Siberian snipers and that kind of thing. That gives you the advantage of being able to move around the map, capture points, and reconnoiter for your core forces.
At the moment, what he's playing, I think he's playing the Germans, or is he advancing with the
Germans?
Yeah,
these are the Soviets. In fact, this
so
weapon
he's
here
with the Soviets now.
Yeah, he's pushing in to capture some more territory and free the bank of the Neva River, and again to break the siege of Leningrad. This is called Operation Spark.
Yep.
We had the really awesome privilege of actually being able to go to this location. There were four of us went to Russia and to Berlin, Germany, to see the kind of beginning of the war and the end of the war, and just immerse ourselves in the culture. So we visited this very site. Right now there's a highway overpass and there's a museum underneath it. But to be able to walk the ground and see what things looked like at the time was really, really incredible.
What sort of things that players that have played the first one will be, you think, surprised or happy to have in this next iteration of the game? What's the main point for you that
we designed the game for the fans of the original, first and foremost. But we wanted to modernize things a little bit. There's a brand new engine in the game. I think it looks incredible. The graphics are sharper. The animations are better. Effects are absolutely amazing. The audio is world class. We did things like record all of the live, the weapon sounds, the live recordings of those. So those are the actual weapons.
All right.
And it really adds a lot of intensity and immersion to the battlefield. So the game looks great. It's running really well. It feels really stable, and because we've been running all of these open betas, we've been able to involve the community in some fantastic feedback and incorporating and rolling that right back in. And we had a patch go live today, in fact.
All right. Okay. I keep going back to the Russian just because they're they're the new kids on the block. So do the Russians have any sort of advantage to the resource of the game? Is there one advantage that they have, like with fuel or manpower, or?
Yeah, their core infantry actually has the ability to merge with other squads, so you can forward reinforce, and that's to kind of get across the idea of numbers, and that saves you a lot of resources to be able to forward reinforce your units. So if you take over an anti-tank gun, for instance, like the one that's on the field, you can build that squad up to a 6-man squad, and it gives them a lot of robustness, and they're much tougher to take out. So in this case here, we'll see the numbers of the Russians and some of the advantages that gives them. Trying to protect against this German onslaught.
See, I would have thought that they were not very. They wouldn't need too much of the fuel sort of resource to move forward, but more of the ammunition and manpower.
Yeah, because they can field a bigger army, there costs them more what we call upkeep.
Yeah.
And so as the manpower, the bigger your army gets, your manpower dwindles, and so the Russians are going to suffer a little more than the Germans in that regard. But later on, the Russians built some incredibly heavy tanks, and we'll see some examples of that. So these are fuel monsters. These are ISUs and IS-2s and late war tanks that were very, very impressive.
And in terms of engineering, what sort of things can the Germans do compared to the Russians, or are they almost on par where they can do bunkers and that sort of thing? But is there any special things that the Russians do that the Germans don't?
Well, the Germans have a slightly more defensive focus. They're able to build bunkers and field defenses and different kinds of minefields. Germans are sort of masters of that a tactical versatility on the battlefield. Their squads are very, very versatile. They're infantry squads, so they can upgrade with Panzerschrecks, very powerful anti-tank weapons. So they've got some hard-hitting forces. The Russians are a little more rigid. If you want some anti-tank, you really have to get an anti-tank gun, for example.
All right, okay. So we just saw air units pass over.
Yep.
Is that a call button that you get as a special power, or do you control these planes?
These are call-ins, but what we've done this time around is actually allow the planes to loiter and pick up targets of opportunity on the battlefield. So it's also a bit of an area denial weapon. You want to protect a piece of the battlefield, you can have a plane loiter over it for a while and just strafe anything that comes near. So the famous Russian IL-2, the sort of tank in the sky, and it's a very effective weapon.
And how long does that last, that ability? Because it seems to be lasting quite a long time.
Yeah, they'll loiter for sort of 30 to 45 seconds. It depends on the ability. Yeah. Some are direct, sort of direct fire bombing runs, and some are using their powerful machine guns and cannons to strafe the German forces.
All right, well, that's all the time that we have. It's a great demo. Can't wait to play the game. Back to you, Naomi.
So, Next up, we have an exclusive look at the next generation of FIFA games. Whether you call it soccer, football, FIFA fans won't want to miss that one.
Douche dads.